Hi and welcome to this week's episode of the Guest List podcast. I'm your host, Steve Guest. Really excited with today's guest, and we're going to be talking about a subject that I am really engaged with, and I know many of our listeners will be too. A bit of a kind of an initial introduction. This podcast has been born out of my book, Top Bill of the Life of a Recruiter, and I wanted to continue the journey and add as much value and content as possible. I asked my listeners and network who they would want to listen to and who they want to hear a conversation with, and this guest was put forward a number of times. So I'm going to read through the bio and then we'll get started. So today's guest is the director of their very own successful company, Perron Financial Group, and host of international podcast, It's More Than Money. This person has been sharing their craft within the financial services sector for the last 20 years. Their passion is to discover subconscious beliefs around money and how people define a successful and fulfilling life, challenging the traditional measures of success, both personal and financial. They love exploring the role of subconscious in human decision-making and the feelings and emotions around abundance, often viewed by many that it's something that only happens to the select few. We go into, hopefully during the podcast today, sharing openly and candidly the personal money story and what today's guest has learned from hundreds of people that has guided in his career. Discovering that once you dig into your own beliefs around money, you too can find abundance and true fulfillment in life. We're going to be talking about the use of money and how we can use it in ways that are meaningful to all of us rather than following limiting and outdated beliefs on how money should be used. We're going to look and explore ways in which we can do what we can do with money, and how we think of money is based on what we've seen or heard others do. The question you have to ask yourself is, what really is meaningful to you? Is that really how you want to use your money? And will it truly enhance your life if you use your money that way? I'm really excited to be speaking to Kye Harris today. So welcome to the Guest List podcast.
Thank you, Steve Guest. Pleasure to be here, mate. I love the intro. Thank you.
A pleasure. I am really excited by today's conversation. I think money and wealth for me, my views have consistently changed over the last 8 years or so. And I feel like I've been on my own journey in terms of discovering and educating myself in wealth and money management. My first question to you, Kye, is why do some people have more money than others? How do we get to that point, and how does it kind of affect us?
Many and varied reasons, Steve, but if we could boil it down into four main points that I've noticed, and effectively, as you alluded to earlier in the intro, was that over the last 20 years and literally hundreds of people that I've worked with over that time have come to drill it down into 4 points. Now, the first one is belief. That is something that those who are wealthy, and I use wealthy interchangeably, it's not just financially, but also emotionally. So they believe. So whether they're believing they can have the money, or whether they believe that they can have a better life and be in a better state of mind, it's one and the same. So belief is number one. They believe it to be possible. They believe that what they possess, they've got the ability to achieve it, whatever it is it looks like for them. Remember that the way I look at it, success is in such a way that it only matters to you. So there's a lot of traditional versions of success out there, but I look at it as a success as it only matters to you. So you need to believe that you possess the ability to achieve it. And they work out a way because they believe there's always a way. So that's number one. Expectation. Now this one's a little bit tricky. Expectation is just purely and simply like you would go to the grocery store expecting to be able to find tomatoes. Just as simple as that. That's how these people that I've seen, that's how they expect wealth. They expect money. They expect abundance. They expect a fulfilling and fruitful life. So expectation, as I sort of alluded to, is that feeling you get to when you just know. There's just that deep knowing. It's never in question. You don't have to mull it over. You don't have to think about it. You don't have to digest. You don't have to talk out loud. You don't have to write some notes or journal about it. You just know that something or someone is going to provide what it is you're looking for. It'll just happen. So that's the two first ones. Second one, deservedness. Now, this one is equally as important, I think, as expectation, but almost equally tricky. So this takes a little bit of deep diving. But what I've noticed in the people that I've worked with is that they believe it, they expect it, but if we don't truly feel that we deserve it, it's never going to happen. So we often have this barrier to deserving what we're worth, and we often don't recognize our true worth. So that also is a bit of a hindrance and ties into deservedness. So it comes into a matter of sort of mastering some of those deeply rooted beliefs within our psyche that we deserve it and we're worth it. So some of these, this lack of deservedness can come from many and varied things. I remember as a kid growing up, at one stage I got asked out by a girl on a date. I didn't have any sort of cool clothes. I was never one to buy clothes, but on reflection, I wasn't really bought clothes that much either, but I wanted these specific pair of shoes. I had to go, they're actually boots. And it was a problem. It was a big problem for my mum to take me out to buy those shoes. It was almost like I felt this could take away from our next meal, or this could take away from our next bill that mum and dad had to pay. So at that moment, I made an agreement with myself effectively that I didn't really deserve the nice things. And on reflection, it wasn't until I got into my 40s that I realized why I didn't like shopping, because I never felt I deserved it anyway. It was never a thing. So when we hear comments like money doesn't grow on trees, money's really hard to come by, or you've gone to ask for something as a child and you've been met with the response of, what do you think I've made of money, do you? Automatically in that moment, we're not objective as adults to see it for what it really is. And as a child, we make this rule that I don't deserve. So the broader cause to feeling undeserved is, you're only celebrated when something good was done or it was a reward for achieving. But we deserve 24/7. We're all worthy of what we desire, and we're all worthy of feeling good 24/7, regardless of what external achievements or what we're accomplishing or what someone else says we're deserved of. So deservedness is a real big one. We can have the belief and we can have the expectation, but it'll never actually really come to us the way we dream of if we don't feel we deserve it or feel we're worthy of it. Last but not least, action. Equally important. Like, we've got to take action. We can't just sit back on the lounge watching TV and hoping that it will come to us. So BEDA, and that's a little bit of a play on investment concepts. When it comes to investing, there's a concept called beta. And I've sort of played with that, and we've got belief, expectation, deservedness, and action. That's what usually differentiates those that have the money and those that don't.
So true. There's so many good parts to that. And whilst listening to you, it was running through my head in terms of my upbringing and my thoughts and how I viewed it as a child, growing up in a single parent family. I'm one of 6 kids. So money wasn't necessarily there. My mum used to have 2, sometimes 3 jobs at any one time. And we grew up on the basis that there was never much money. And I think I've still got parts of that belief where I don't buy clothes. I still don't. I think we spoke when we spoke a couple of weeks ago, didn't we? I wear shirts that are probably 10, 11 years old, and my wife's still telling me.
I'm not too far behind.
Yeah. Your memories come up on Facebook, and I'm wearing the shirt that I was wearing 4 years ago. And she's like, why have you still got that shirt? I don't know whether that's a character trait or just something about money, but it starts to resonate on the basis that I think I just didn't spend it. And whether that's a deserved thing or a frugal thing, I'm not sure.
And that's learned behavior too, Steve. Like, you can go down the road of that frugality, and that's a learned behavior as well. Yeah. So there's many of people, and myself included, I've worked with that frugalness, that fear of, save for a rainy day. So what does that even mean? What's the rainy day mean? How much do I save? When's enough? So we end up sort of overall, through many and varied reasons and whatever environmental factors we've been exposed to in our upbringing and even as adults, we just end up being in this state of mind where there's a shortage. There's a shortage of everything. And it can be a really, really big shortage that we feel, or it could be a very, very small shortage. So some people feel, they're very, very confident. They'll take on anything, they'll go after anything. But they may not feel that they're deserved of their true value in their work. So they might be underpaid. So it all plays out really from what we feel is our worth. And that is at the core of everything. To me, and and certainly not dismissing the issues that are going on in the world at the moment with COVID. But if we look at it as a systemic problem across the globe and has been for hundreds of years, it's our own sense of worth. That's what impacts whether we achieve or have a successful life or feel good about our life or not, is our sense of worth.
And I think sometimes it's about balance, isn't it? And if we go back, if I think I've been brought up from a frugal perspective on the basis, my mum used to save pennies in little plastic bags on the fireplace, and then that might buy something the following week. And my wife and I, we've been together 20 years this year. And I'm very much save for the rainy day. Let's go and invest it over here. Let's put some over here.
Yeah.
And my wife's very much, let's spend it today. Let's go on holiday. Let's go and do this. And there's always been that sense of, I suppose, a tug of war of where the money or the cash flows. And I think the balance over the years has allowed me to perhaps spend a little bit more.
Yeah.
And not be completely the saver. And in many ways, my wife doesn't spend necessarily as fast anymore, but at least might sleep on it for 24 hours.
Well,
I hope she doesn't listen to this, or I'm in trouble.
You've touched on two very, very common concepts there. And it's so common in so many couples that I've met with over the years that we tend to balance each other out. And unbeknownst to ourselves, subconsciously, we've chosen each other on purpose. So in essence, and carve it up and break it up as much as we possibly could in where time permits otherwise. But for yourself, Steve, it's like, well, you've got this almost desire to be a little bit more like your wife. You want to feel that freedom. You want to feel that you can just go and do and spend and do whatever. Whereas your wife is possibly looking at it going, okay, maybe I could use just a little bit more structure and identifying what it is that I find more purpose and priority in, and I'll put my money to that. So that's something that we lose sight of. And that's one reason also that, and it ties into the beta I was talking about, BEDA, that some people have more money than others because they consistently apply themselves to a plan over a time. They consistently apply themselves to a priority. So people actually make it harder by either starting later in life, or they just don't prioritize things that matter over things that don't. So, we're wired for immediate gratification. It's actually a pain denying ourselves of a strong desire. It's the avoidance of that pain. And that's a far bigger motivator than the pursuit of pleasure. And that pleasure might be an epic holiday once per year. But throughout the year, we're buying that other coffee, we're ducking out for dinner, we're buying that shirt or that pants, maybe not in our case, Steve, buying shirts and shoes and whatever, but that immediate gratification. So it's the avoidance of the short-term pain of missing out on feeling like we're lacking, and rather than pursuing what matters most, which might be that annual holiday, which is with family. It's a truly memorable experience. There's great memories created. It's something you can reflect on. There's connection made during that experience. That's one of the issues, is that immediate gratification. And as a couple, you're not alone. It's very, very common.
I think so my wealth journey, I suppose, a better education on money came around 2012. It was the year our oldest son was born. I think you have that extra responsibility, and you've got to start thinking perhaps a little bit more long term. And I'm thinking, I want to make sure that my children have opportunities as they grow up. And I read a book called Rich Dad, Poor Dad, Robert Kiyosaki. Yep. Many people have read it worldwide. It's a big seller. And there was an element within that book where he wanted to buy a sports car. Mm-hmm. And he was saying quite often people just ask the wrong question or pose the wrong question. And it's not things like, I'm never going to be able to afford that. I can't afford that. It's how am I going to be able to afford that? And then you find a way of creating cash flow that basically pays for the product or item or service that you're looking for. And I think that changed my thought process and my belief in everything's affordable. You've just got to be creative in a way that allows you to go and make the purchase.
Yeah, absolutely. You've touched on a really, really important concept there, is reframing. So how we start changing our beliefs is awareness of what's at play. So if you have that, it's awareness of that comment that comes up saying, I can't afford it. So soften the language. I could afford it. I'll just sort of figure out a way. So if you soften that language, it makes it just that little bit more attainable, just in that moment. And just with that little bit of a shift in feeling like, okay, I've opened up a little bit of possibility here for myself, then you can build momentum from there. You can't build momentum by effectively talking yourself out of everything before you even give it a chance to start. So if you're already saying, I can't afford it, you've cut yourself off immediately. It's never going to happen. And you're right. You're exactly right. If you say you can't afford it, then it's never going to happen. So,
yeah, you've stopped yourself in your own tracks, haven't you? And I think many a time we've touched on it already, on the basis that we as humans, we want instant gratification. We want to be able to buy it now. We want it in our hands. We want to be able to say, look what I've just bought. And that seems to be more the general trend than, I want a 5-year plan. I want a 10-year plan. I want to know where I'll be in 10 years and at least have something that might change over those 10 years. But actually, it's a bigger goal and it's spread over a longer period of time.
Yeah. And the question needs to be asked there is why? Why would someone, or why would you, or why would anyone in a certain instance with a goal want that goal? That's a really big question to ask and get very clear on, because we are, I guess, in a society that just has this expectation, and it is the norm to have goals. And if you don't have goals, you're potentially lazy, or you have no drive, and you're not going anywhere. And there's all those sorts of stigmas that come around not having a goal. So instinctively, and almost like just environmentally, we're wired to have goals. So the program that's been installed in us is to have a goal. But we're never taught how to live life with a certain intention. And that intention purely could be just to be happy, no matter what. So if we had that in today's terms, or what's most common terms, I should say, if we had that as our goal, then that's a daily practice. That's not something we have to wait for 5 years down the track. Because historically, goals are, like you said, 5-10 years down the track. It's like waiting for the lotto win that's never going to come, but you spend so long waiting, and the true joy you think is attached to the achievement of that goal, when you get there, and we've all experienced this, I'm the same, we get there, we go, oh well, it wasn't that great. I'm here. Right, I'll set another goal. It must have to be a bigger one. So we just end up on this constant loop of needing to achieve to feel fulfilled. So we're after a goal for the feeling we think we're going to have in the achievement of it, when the feeling we're after is available to us every single day if we just put it into practice, irrespective of our circumstances, what's going on around us, or the conditions of our life. So yeah, it gets a bit
true,
it is.
I set myself on a path. So I'm 42 now, 42, February just gone. And when I was 35, I decided that I wanted to be financially free by the time I'm 45. Big goal, scary. At the time, I sat there and thought, I don't really have any idea how I'm going to get there. But it was a 10-year plan of surrounding myself with the right people, reading the right books, understanding about wealth management and about money, and how to make sure that you're perhaps investing in the right areas, and you've got steps to take over a longer period. I'm 42, so I'm 3 years away from being financially free, living on that yacht in the Bahamas. It's all there. Am I going to make it? Not sure. Am I 7 years better placed than I was when I started? Most definitely. And I think there's been lots of learning curves. There's been lots of steps along the way, and I am most certainly in a better place than I would have been if I hadn't set that plan in place. But I think so few people do it. And I suppose from where we are now, if there was something you were going to say in terms of how do people get started, regardless of age, regardless of where they are, what do they do if they're sat in a position now thinking there's got to be more to this than what I'm doing? How do you get moving? What's the one thing that perhaps people do or don't do that is costing them money?
Well, exactly what you've touched on, set a goal. So I'm not against setting goals, but it's just making sure that the goal isn't the be all and end all in and of itself. So I would ask the question to yourself around what you've done over the last 7 years. You may or may not achieve the goal you set out to, but how much more fulfilled are you for having set that intention and practice what you have done for the last 7 years? So the goal is important. It sets the motivation up. It gets you going. What actually keeps you there is setting a goal, sort of identifying and playing around with what's giving you that sense of purpose along the way. So we're wired for creation, we're wired for involvement. But if you're setting a goal that's purely money-based, I guarantee you there will not be fulfillment or gratification during that time. You will run on empty. That's why some of the most wealthiest in the world are still incredibly miserable and incredibly unhappy. You never see a monk become or want to become a millionaire or a billionaire, but you see a lot of millionaires and billionaires tap out and go live like a monk type life, a very simplified life, and they get out of the career world or the corporate world. So setting a goal is a very, very, very smart move to make to get you going. But it's how you pay attention to what you're doing along the way that'll keep you going along that goal. And along the way, if you're paying attention and being grateful for what you're learning and what you're accomplishing, the goal actually tends to become a little less important, because you're starting to realize if you allow yourself to create and allow yourself to get into the flow and the process of achieving that goal, you're actually getting all the abundance and all those feelings of freedom and all those freedoms of creation, all those freedoms of little wins along the way. If you're paying attention to that, you're already getting what you thought you'd only get if you got that goal. So it's already happening. And if we start recognizing that and appreciating that it's already happening along the way, the goal is going to actually come a lot easier, and there'll actually be more and more of them come along.
So it's a great food for thought. One thing that came to mind when you were talking about that was the book, The Monk That Sold His Ferrari. I don't know whether you've ever read that. That's a great book. It's a great book, but that was kind of running through my head. The thought that was
very true.
Yeah, that occurred to me then. We have a lot of conversations in the office, and quite often we'll talk about incentives. We're in a sales environment here, so it's very much about, where do you want to go and eat? What's the really fanciest restaurant you'd like to go and do? What's the event that you really want to go and attend? And quite often the conversations will be, I'm never going to have enough money to do that, or spending a weekend in Monaco on a yacht watching the Grand Prix. That's just out there in terms of things to do. And my view is always, okay, well, how are you going to do it? What's the cost? Write the cost down. What have you got to do to achieve that? How many placements, how many recruitment placements have you got to make to achieve that? Start making it specific. Start writing down the numbers, and then a plan of action of how you're going to do it. And then work towards doing that to make the achievement real. And I think many times people will stop in their tracks because they just think it's out there. But actually, if you think, how am I going to do it? What have I got to do to get there? You're more likely to go out there and achieve it.
Yeah, absolutely. And if you're setting a goal and you break it down into steps, it can actually make it even seem or appear even more achievable than you thought it was. And the clients we've been working with for countless amount of years, and also the countless amount of clients over the years that we have worked with, people don't actually realize their financial potential. They actually don't believe what they are actually capable of. And I don't mean just by what they can do by climbing a career ladder or growing their business. I'm even referring to where people are at their current level. People underestimate. And again, that's that shortage mentality. I've had clients that have millions of dollars effectively accrued in different assets, and they're still doubting whether they can retire. And I've literally just sat down with them and said, you're good to go, finish work. And they actually don't believe me. I've had to break it down and say to them, look, because one of the ladies actually said to me, she goes, I don't know whether you're missing something. And I said, well, I'll tell you now, I'm not, but let's say I am. Let's say I'm missing a lot of things. And let's just do simple maths here. You've got multiple millions of dollars here, and the income that you're desiring per year to live off is this. That equates to 3.2% of what you've got in the bank. Your money should earn at least 5% a year. So what does that tell you? And she said, well, it should grow. I said, exactly. I said, that's just simple maths.
Yeah.
So don't worry about what I've said. Don't worry about the assessments and the due diligence that I've done. That's just a simple maths that explains you have enough. But what the challenge continues to be for that lady and that couple is the mindset. she still doesn't believe it because she's been in this train of thought for 45 years that there's never enough. There's just not enough. So no matter what they put away every month or every year into their investments and whatnot, she was constantly thinking there's not enough, there's not enough, there's not enough. That's not going to be unraveled in a matter of a few months. So we are constantly now working with her to reassure her that she's okay. And it's much like an oncologist when seeing someone who has cancer. You go into remission, you go back for a checkup, they do all their assessments, they do their blood tests, they do their x-rays, they do their scans, and the oncologist comes back to you and says, you're all good, go live your life, everything's clear. Well, people usually just run for their lives and go for it. But for some reason, this emotional charge that money has, we're so attached to it, and our lives are almost driven by the achievement of more of it, because we think if we have more of it, we're going to be happier. But the mindset has to change. Your mindset will always match your money. So you can chase money all you like, but the mindset has to play catch up, or the money just won't catch up to your mindset. It depends. So you've got to work on the mindset. So whatever it is to get it started, what gets people motivated, it's really a matter of what keeps them stuck to it. So you touched on within the office, there's a lot of sales targets, there's a lot of revenue targets. Does that trip to Monaco really mean that much? So they've got to dig a bit more. Maybe it's just the allure of what they feel they will, what they think they will feel like if they have the money to go do that. You follow what I mean?
Completely. And I think I'm one that would quite happily just sit in the living room, watch the money grow, and work hard during the day, but invest and put it in areas that will help the cash to grow. And I'm constantly being reminded life's about experience. Life's about going out and doing things that are either that kind of bucket list thing that you've always wanted to do, or actually spending it so that you appreciate the finer things in life. I'm talking about my wife there in terms of let's go and do that. Let's go and do this. And
work a little harder, Steve.
Yeah, well, exactly. And look, I mean, I say it in a really positive light, because I think if I was on my own, I wouldn't be doing anything. And I also think
when you'd just be saving, would you?
That's it. I would be the world's biggest saver. In terms of obviously being a dad and having 2 kids, I'm of the thought process that I want them to have lots of opportunity, lots of options as they grow up. And the idea of having little pockets of investments or assets or cash in different places that grow over time is really important to me. And I've had to self-educate. As we mentioned earlier, I've read lots and lots of books, and I surround myself with people that are on a similar path or a similar journey. Talking to people like yourself from a selfish perspective, I'm loving this conversation because
you're getting free therapy sessions, Steve.
Oh, hugely, and I would like to think, obviously, the listeners are getting the same.
It's a magnificent topic, and it's everybody in the world suffers with it in some way or another.
Yeah, I think one of the biggest problems, if you can call it a problem, is now everything is so accessible with things like the internet and the ability to trade shares and invest in the stock market, to go out and then obviously buy property. There's lots of property gurus out there sharing their rags to riches stories and then sell their training and various things. Property and shares have certainly been part of my journey over the last 9 years or so. Talk to me about that, because I think a lot of the time people are very much overwhelmed on either the risk or the potential of being a millionaire by the end of the day if they invest well in the stock today.
Or Bitcoin, having a Bitcoin moment, I like to refer to.
I mean, we talked off air, didn't we, about Bitcoin? So I dabble in Bitcoin. Do I understand it? Not really. Do I have the fear of missing out? Most definitely.
Yeah. FOMO is a bit of a killer. It gets everyone at some stage or another. And like property versus share debate, it is very subjective. What I know and my experience in dealing with people in different investments, and I'm in a very, 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 very privy position where I have literally a crystal ball. So I get to Our oldest client is 84. So I get to see people in their 80s, their 70s, their 60s, and what financial position and what level or what standard of living that they have according to the decisions they made when they're in their 30s and 40s. So I've got the best crystal ball ever. So what I've seen in property versus shares is that long term is the go. We are all looking for that Bitcoin moment, that moment where we've got a tip from someone at the water cooler or in the lunchroom or at the pub on Sunday afternoon that's going to take us from rags to riches in a matter of days or at weeks at best. We're looking for that lotto win. And that's our sort of psychological discomfort associated with self-denial. That's why we keep buying things and doing things now, because we want that immediate gratification. But when it comes to property versus shares, long-term is the first rule. So long-term means at least 7 to 10 years. I've had clients jump on a property bubble here in Australia, and after 7 years, they're questioning why they haven't made any more money. It's like, well, because it usually takes 20 to 30 years to make the money. Oh, but my uncle and this and that made money on property in a few years. I said, that's pot luck. They might have got into a market, then made the money, or they might have held it for so long that by the time they sold it doubled in price. So property versus shares is pros and cons. Shares are a lot more volatile. They change in price literally thousands and thousands, sometimes millions of times a day, depending on what shares you're in and how many you have, etc. Property doesn't. Property is valued at the day you buy it, and then it's valued at the day you sell it. So it feels like it's less risky because we're not constantly getting a real estate agent ringing us every single hour of the day telling us that the property value has changed. You tell them to beat it. You wouldn't want their calls anymore. You'd hang up on them. So that's one of the main differences between property and shares, is that property is not valued every minute of the day like shares are. So we then assume that property is safer, which it isn't. Shares, when you are diversified well enough, like there's risk in everything. When you diversify well enough, you can mitigate that risk like in an extreme way. Like you can really mitigate it to almost nothing. Risk in shares is often used interchangeably with volatility, and it's not right. The risk of a share comes about of, do we want to invest in Steve and Kye's new business? And they're trying to raise $1 million for, really, they don't have anything going at the moment. They don't have a concept. They don't have a business plan. They have nothing. That's a risk. A share in a major company like this is not a tip, by the way, in an Amazon or a Google, just had to be, that's the financial planning compliance part coming in. Yeah. Google, for example, is it's not a tip. It's not just because it changes in share price on any given day, it doesn't mean it's a risky investment. So there's 3 ways to make money. There's property, there's business, which is shares, and there's cash. That's more or less it. And if you look at the billionaires of the world, where have they made their money? They made their money in business. Or people say, no, they made it in property. No, they're in the business of property, whether it be property development, whether it be just construction of high rises and then selling, whatever it may be, they're in the business of. So when you're investing in shares, that's what you're investing in. You're investing in capitalism, like it or hate it, capitalism. And you're not going to stop that freight train. Capitalism is what you're investing in when you're investing in shares. And if it isn't Google, it's taking up the market share, it's going to be another IT search company. If it isn't Facebook, it's going to be another social media site. There's always going to be someone waiting in the wings to take that share up or to take that market spot up. So that's what you're investing in when it comes to shares. Property versus shares, it depends on the country that you're looking at, but they can be much of a muchness. So they are interchangeable. The problem with property is when it comes to liquidating, it's hard. You can't just sell a bathroom. You can't just sell a few bricks off to get some money out if you need it. You're either in or you're out. That's it. There's no in between. Shares, you can drip feed some money out if you need it, or you can drip feed money in. So shares offer the capability of compound interest. And that's the 8th wonder of the world, according to Einstein. So if you're reinvesting the interest into shares and you get that compound effect, $1,000 a month can turn into 1.5 million over 30 years, but that can actually turn into over 3 million in 40 years. So that's the effect of compound interest. Property, you can't do that. So there's pros and cons. Both can work equally as well, but it needs to be a long-term investment, that's for sure. I tried to keep that very short, Steve. It's a long one.
I love it though. I would say if I go back to my first investment in my own education after university and everything else, was actually investing in a 12-month program to become a FX and commodity trader in 2012. Yep. It was a lot of money. And if I'm honest, FX trading, it was day trading. So it was multiple trades across days, Monday to Friday. Psychologically and from a mindset perspective, is probably the toughest thing I've ever done. I remember setting yeah, I mean, you'd set trades up and you'd be 200-300 pips in profit. I'd take a call, walk into the meeting room, come back to my desk, and I'd 300 points down. I'd lost. It had gone past my stop, and I'm sat there thinking, I've only been on the phone for 3 minutes. How have I just lost money?
That's not going to be good for your mindset who likes to save for a rainy day, mate.
Quite honestly, I mean, I love the story because it taught me a lot about risk, and it taught me about my understanding and belief in myself, because I'm a spreadsheet guy, because I'm a risk averse process procedure person. I love the back testing. I love the fact of testing trades and trade strategies over a 2 or 3 year period to understand how successful your win-loss ratio is going to be. And I could do the back testing to a T, and I would work hours at it. And then I'd do my first trade and lose, and I'm sat there going, but that was meant to win. I've done the tests. And it probably took a good maybe year, maybe even 2 years to get into the process of actually, when trades go down, or when stocks or markets go down, and you invest when it's down and it's over a longer term, that actually it's a really good position to be in. I've been in positions where I was investing in my own ISA, and the stock markets in the UK and actually global stock markets plummeted by about 20-30% overnight, and I closed off all my trades and actually just consolidated the loss and sat there going, I can't believe I've lost all this money. And yet now, 10 years on, I'm sat there thinking that's the perfect time to put lots more in, because they always rebound. And it's that kind of to and fro. But now, I mean, reading the likes of Warren Buffett and Ray Dalio and various other people, I invest in tracker funds, and it's monthly investments that are, yes, there's still risk, but it's a managed risk on the basis that I don't have sleepless nights. I know when the markets go down, I'm going to buy better. When the markets go up, I don't buy so well. But over time and over a longer period, hopefully it pays dividends. But it's having the ability. Money now? Oh, massively. I say massively. Yeah, no.
Compared to the losses, I guess you're right.
Yeah, completely. And look, I've learned over the years.
I just want to add in there. Sorry, Steve. I just want to add in there. See what happened. You changed what you believed to work, and through your reading, through your study, and otherwise, you tried a different approach as a result of adopting new beliefs and stopped using your old beliefs, and now you're getting a better result.
Yeah.
Albeit a subtle change.
Completely. And I think it's definitely been about education. But I think sometimes you have to go through the toughness and that elements where you wake up and look at your account and you think, how is it that low? How have I lost all that money overnight? I remember going on holiday and trading. Yeah. I remember it was it a Saturday? So the markets are closed on the Friday, and I was hugely up on 2 or 3 trades. And I say hugely, I never invested huge amounts. Hugely as in it's £1 a pip or £2 a pip, and I was maybe.
So it was a big percentage base increase?
Yeah, big percentage, but not huge values. And markets closed, and I was up on all my trades. And we went away for a week. I think we were in Portugal, and obviously you look at your account and you're up, your profit's up, and then the markets opened on the Monday, and all my trades lost because something had happened over the weekend where the markets opened below my stop. So not only where I thought I'd managed the risk, it opened below it. And I'd lost more than I thought. And the mindset and psychology of that is quite frightening, because you sit there and think, how has that happened, first of all? And then you sit there and you either give in and you think, yeah, that's not for me. I was never going to master that. It's way too hard. or you come up with a plan to think, okay, well, how do I manage it so that it best fits me? How do I suppose, educate myself to continue doing what I'm doing, but perhaps go down a slightly different path. And then
you can't get it wrong. Like this is all learning.
Yeah,
and you put yourself in a better position as a result.
Yeah, the bad days have helped me improve where I am because I've come up with a solution, and it's perhaps how do you get past this to make sure that longer term you're better off.
Yeah, absolutely. And that's you're right.
Yeah, no, I was going to say the next thing was the property side of things. Again, the biggest thing with property was that first purchase and the risk associated with it, because you think everything's going to go wrong.
Yeah,
I'm a big supporter of Aston Villa Football Club.
Yeah,
and the chairman of Aston Villa was a guy called Doug Ellis, or Sir Doug Ellis. And I went to see an audience with Doug Ellis, and it was only a small group of people. And I think he was 86 at the time. And he said an apple well bought is twice sold, or something along them lines. And that stayed with me for years, on the basis that if you make the purchase right, you get the purchase correct. In essence, you should always be in a position to make money. And that's how I viewed my property element.
Yeah. And it can be a bit tougher with property because not many people have a capacity to buy, let's say, 100 of them. So that it's one at a time, maybe to a max of 3 or 4. It just depends on the individual, obviously, and their capacity. But that first one, it's hard whether we buy, number 7 Smith Street or number 10 Jones Street and 3 suburbs over or 2 towns over. So it's a little bit trickier just as a consideration versus shares. Shares, you can buy a package of up to 500 or more shares. So you've got more chance of getting it right than you do in property, and that can make it a little bit trickier. Again, just pros and cons of each, but it just takes, like you said, the education to understand. If you're doing it all yourself, is educate you and look at those and mirror yourself from the behavior of those who have done it successfully. I know about you in the UK, but in Australia, what I refer to as the property spruikers are out there selling properties to more or less unsuspecting Australians who are buying into these properties on the basis that it's going to make them rich, when in actual fact, they're just getting jammed into terrible property investments. And the ones who are making money are the developers. They're the ones that are making it. So, we see property and wealth synonymous. We see it, as mutually inclusive, but it's not. It's the property developers that are making it, flogging off to people and selling it in such a way, oh, Mr. and Mrs. Jones, if you buy this, you'll get rich. So it's just about, again, what I refer back to is education. Do your homework, get educated, and talk to the right people that don't have a vested interest in selling something to you, but just generally care about others, want to share their story or whatever it might be. That's the way to go.
Okay, now we are running over a little bit here normally, but I love having these conversations. So
yeah, me too.
Talk to me about Bitcoin. So I dabble. I have very little understanding of Bitcoin, really. But I have that fear of missing out, and I don't want to be left behind.
Steve,
is it a good investment?
We need to catch up off air.
It's a big old subject, isn't it?
It is. It is a big old subject, but when it comes to Bitcoin, in very, very basic terms, Bitcoin does not exist. It's not supported by, it has no fundamental backing. It has nothing behind it whatsoever. It is actually thin air. The only thing that makes it valued or makes it worth something is the fact of the people involved in it. So that then becomes more of a voting game than it does become an investment of substance. So what you're actually then getting involved with is what anyone can do at any one time. Now you look at Elon Musk, what he did a few weeks back. He manipulated that price something unbelievable with the money he was putting in and saying he was pulling out. That is the difference between what an actual investment is versus what something speculative is. Huge difference. And it's used, again, interchangeably. If you look at newspaper headlines when there's a market crash, it'll say investors bail out as market tumbles, and then 3 days later, investors pole back in as market gains prior losses or something along those lines. You look through the history of headlines, it's exactly the same through every crash. I might just say, as media people, you need to get a new gig, like come up with some new headlines or something.
Yeah.
But anyway, that's another podcast. If you get in, so Bitcoin is, as I said, it just doesn't exist. There's no substance there. There's no value there. It's only driven by what someone else is willing to pay based on hype alone. So when it comes to Bitcoin, we don't recommend it. We're not in it. And it's for that reason alone. That's not because we don't like it. It's because it's thin air. It doesn't exist.
Yeah.
Now, what I have seen on the flip side is a cryptocurrency structured differently. And the cryptocurrency, one I know of, is that it's actually, the value of it is only determined by those who are actually using it as a means of exchange. So let's say, for example, Steve, we've got our own businesses and you accept this coin. It's called Guest Coin. And I use Guest Coin to pay for things. So I pay for a service of yours using my Guest Coin, you receive it, and then you go use it in another store. So the more people that use it, the higher the value of it. And in no way, shape or form can we have a whale come in and sell a truckload of it, manipulating the price to then only buy back in a few weeks later and make a massive gain. That, I think, is going to be a cryptocurrency that will work. And I think that's going to be something that people will really get on board with, because they know purely that that currency is not manipulated by any billionaire, by any government, or by anyone whatsoever. It's purely driven by how many people are participating in the use of it. That's something I think it could work. And I think it's only a matter of time before a cryptocurrency becomes a normal means of exchange.
Yeah, and I think where we are at the moment, certainly from a financial perspective, it's about disruption, isn't it? It's about gaining some control and perhaps removing the banks and the banking facilities from it. It's happened across various industries. Cryptocurrency is certainly along those lines.
Yeah, it's all been manipulated for far too long. And if you look at the breakdown of the gold standard, which is in basic terms, not getting into a history lesson here, but was more or less broken down by the US to then have basically all major currencies pegged against the US dollar. Well, that served them very well. So that's what's been manipulated for decades now. So I'm with you. I love variety. I love disruption. And then along the way, we're going to find things that we don't like, that don't quite work, but it always leads to something that does work and that we do like. So this is just part of it. It's good. I think it's a good time. We've got so much variety and so many options.
Kye, I have absolutely enjoyed every minute of that. And I could quite honestly carry on talking because there's so many questions. We've covered such a variety of topics as well. I always ask this question at the end of a podcast episode. If there was one piece of advice you'd offer any of the listeners today, what would that one piece of advice be?
All right. There's three parts, ABC. Practice daily what you appreciate about yourself and everything around you. Second thing, be aware of the self-talk, because if you let it run, guaranteed it'll run far enough and take you into a hole that you're going to have trouble digging out of. So get out ahead of it. Think about where you want to be. Make that your only focus. Only focus on how you want it to be. Don't complain how it isn't, because we're addicted to talking incessantly about the woes of our world and our life. Focus only and talk only about how you want it to be. And thirdly, be kind to yourself, people. We take it far, far too seriously. Simplify the pressure we put on ourselves to do more. In any challenging moment, just simply look at what you've done. Celebrate what you've already achieved. Look for the next best feeling thought. Be kind to yourself, bit of self-love, bit of self-compassion. You're doing really well, and it's only going to get better if you maintain that momentum.
I love that. What an amazing way to finish the episode. Final thing, if people want to come and find you and reach out to you and get some more information from you, where's the best place to come and find you?
Three best places: LinkedIn, Kye Harris. Just look up my profile on LinkedIn. Looking very well dressed in my suit. It was one of those days I went shopping because I had a photo shoot. Facebook, we have a company Facebook page called Perron Financial Group, and my email, Kye, Kye, @perronfg.com. Reach out. I love talking about this sort of stuff. I think it's really, really important we start changing the narrative we all have around money and success so we can feel better no matter what supposedly is being accomplished. So I'm keen to connect with anyone.
Fantastic. I love that. All the links will be put in the show notes as well. Kye, it's been an absolute pleasure. Thank you so much.
It has been a pleasure, Steve. I loved it. Thank you, mate.